What's up, everyone? Well, today I thought I'd share a little bit of the backstory of this valley oak that I started from an acorn back in 2005. When I was a beginner in bonsai, I really came at bonsai from the angle of capturing the essence of trees that I had enjoyed as a child growing up in rural Northern California. And valley oaks were one of the trees that I really felt were iconic. I really felt that valley oaks represented my childhood. And so the first batch of trees that I started from seed were valley oaks. And I picked the acorns off of a tree in the Sacramento area, Roseville specifically. And it was a very large, very stately old tree that was the centerpiece of a park in the city of Roseville. And I planted the acorns, most of them directly into the ground, not really knowing much at the time about how I wanted to work with them, but just knowing that I wanted them to grow as quickly as possible initially. And when I dug them back up a year or two later to put them into containers to continue growing them, I actually did lose quite a few of them. But obviously this is one that survived, and the backstory is long. This is so almost 17 years old at this point, and I have grown it in the ground and then dug it up and then put it back into a raised bed for a number of years and then dug it up again and then grown it in a large box and then repotted it finally into a bonsai container. And it's been in this container for 3 or 4 years, and I've actually shared pictures of it right after it was repotted into this container. But it continues to kind of show more and more nice signs of becoming a mature bonsai. And only 3 years ago, there was almost no bark splitting. The sort of characteristic bark texture of these guys as older trees is to see these deep fissured plates of bark near, especially on the lower trunk. And one of the nice things that's resulted from these two low branches is that sort of natural taper. There was no extra sacrifice branch here or anything like that to create that extra bulk that's right there at the base. And it might be a combination of these two guys as well as the placement of the Nabari. When the trees were really young, I cut off the tap roots and then planted them on top of boards for the second time that they were ground grown. And I have 3 others of these that I'm about to dig up out of my yard and put into boxes. And the result was that I got a lot of nice lateral large roots and created a pretty good flair on the trunk. There were some issues with it in the sense that the flat board actually created roots that went a little bit too far laterally. I would have preferred if they'd gone laterally and sloping down a little bit more. This one slopes down, but these guys actually kind of come up a little bit. So in the past, I've worked with a carving tool to reduce some of the wood over here, and now the tree is rolling over some of those scars that I created with the carving tool. And if I were going to show this, I would cover that with moss. It's as I was right before I was starting to film the video, I thought to myself, I wonder if I should take a picture of this and submit it to the jury for the Pacific Bonsai Expo later this year. It's already in a show pot, and because it's a deciduous tree, I can see all of the details in the branching at this time of year. The seasonality of the tree for a fall show, you would think would be great. You would think that it would have some fall color right about the time that the expo is going to happen. The date of the expo was picked specifically to nail like the kind of height of local color here in the San Francisco Bay Area for most bonsai artists. And unfortunately, these guys are not super cooperative when it comes to fall foliage in my experience. They often will drop their leaves more like the middle of December. So if I was going to try to get this to be in fall color for the expo, I would probably need to send it somewhere where there's significantly colder fall weather than what we have here in the San Francisco area. It also has struggled a little bit in a container to grow really healthy here in my yard in San Francisco, because it's not really warm enough in the summer months, and these guys, being native to the Sacramento Valley, are used to a lot hotter temperatures. And this past summer I sent it up to a friend's place in the foothills of the Sierra Nevada for a couple of months, and each time that I've sent it elsewhere for a hotter summer, it's kind of perked itself up, whereas if I keep it here all summer, it has a tendency to defoliate itself in the colder months of like July and August, and then pop out new leaves kind of weekly in the fall months before going dormant again in the winter. And the result of that sort of non-ideal climate conditions for the tree is that I do get a little bit of twig dieback if I'm letting it go year after year here in the colder summer weather. And so a little vacation, a little summer camp up to the foothills of the Sierra is, I think, a good idea for these guys if you're growing them like I am in the fog of San Francisco. All right, so I put the backdrop down so you can get a clearer kind of spin of the tree without all of the distracting pots in the background. And let's just talk about a little bit about the design of the tree. When I look at valley oaks in nature, what I see is sort of a water fountain shape, and as opposed to the standard bonsai kind of pine shape where you have a trunk and the first branch, second branch, back branch kind of structure. With oak trees, it's really, and a lot of deciduous trees or even broadleaf evergreens, the structure can be very different. And that's really what I've been going for ever since I started these guys, as with the intention of creating sort of a replica of the California wild in miniature. I don't generally think of bonsai just as miniature trees, but in this case, I guess I kind of do. Now, when I say water fountain, what I mean is that in the middle, the trunk kind of comes up, usually on a valley oak, goes relatively straight with a little bit of wiggling. And then it starts to arc outward. It starts to split and arc outward. And then as the branches move outward, they arc down. And ultimately, in many of the older specimens, you actually see pendulous, almost like a weeping willow type branch way out at the edge. So I've taken a look at this a couple of times before, and what I realized is that I really like it more when I have these outer branches kind of down a little bit more, and even like this branch coming down like this. So I'll probably go ahead and guy these down in order to maintain that look a little bit better. You can see that I've got this branch sort of managed to stay in position without any additional coaxing here in the back, which gives nice depth. This one could probably come down as well, and maybe even one of the ones over here. Although if I bring this one down, this one will provide a little bit better depth behind it than it would have by itself, especially if I chose to bring some of these guys down as well. So in the end, I probably won't submit this to the jury for the expo, and the reason is that I believe that for the size of the trunk that I have here, that the crown is not quite filled out enough. I'd really like to see the crown, not too much taller, but a lot more solid in some of these areas. So if I bring this down, I'm spreading out and taking up some of the space, which leaves more space for these guys and whatnot. So they have a very apically dominant growth habit, and so it's a lot easier to fill in the twigs up here than it is to get these guys to really take off. And so bending these down will be my best bet in terms of filling out the silhouette and really getting this to continue to develop. But it's got a couple of inches sort of missing in my mind. The other thing that makes it not really look like a mature tree to me is that there's not really any barking yet on any of the branches except for that one just starting. And so I'd really like to see a little bit more maturity in the entire composition. Now that might take another 15 years, but hopefully not. If I can keep it growing vigorously, we should start to see some more bulking in the branch structure in these larger primary branches, which would then, in my experience, lead to some more bark on those parts of the composition and a more mature looking overall composition. The tree, it does have a few faults, but I kind of don't mind them so much myself. The first one that I noticed really is some reverse taper in this area. It's actually really common to see in valley oaks in California, coastal California, that there are a lot of branches coming out of sort of one junction. And I think, the only solution at this point to solving this reverse taper issue is really just to start taking off branches. But I don't think that actually would improve the tree because the reverse taper would largely still be there. And I could, take off a branch and then carve out half the trunk. But in this case, I'm not really planning on doing that. And so I've picked the front really to kind of disguise or de-emphasize that portion of the trunk where it's swollen, and so the swelling is really sort of front to back and you don't notice it from the chosen front as much. And then I would say the only other thing that I'm not super happy with is just the size of some of the branching. With valley oaks, the upper structure tends to get pretty large and woody, and so it'll be a number of years before I can get these smaller branches that are up here in the crown to start to look a little bit more like a valley oak that you would see out in the middle of a field full of cows in rural California. Thanks everyone, I hope you enjoyed that. And if you have experience with valley oaks, leave some comments below. And you missed it's January 2022 right now. If you want to pick acorns from valley oaks, look for those in like October, November each year. Some year there's a lot of oak acorns on a given tree, and other years there's almost none. So sometimes it'll take you a little while to get them. I don't have a lot in my growing operation, but I do have a few that I'm working on that are younger than this one. So thanks everyone for watching, and we'll see you next time.